So my social problem is the school to prison pipeline. So the pipeline is basically a phenomenon where young people are arrested at school for behavior that will not normally be considered dangerous. So basically, like the first introduction, it'll be like the first introduction to the criminal justice system, which is basically like sets up individuals for future interactions with the justice system. It's based on disciplinary policies and practice created um, um, from like the school board in the United States, and it's linked to disproportionately affect disabled, Latino, and Black students. So currently, the pipeline shows biases and stereotyping and cultural factors. Well, current research shows that biases, stereotyping, and cultural factors contribute to the pipeline. Number one, the stereotypes regarding the danger of Black and Latino men can also contribute to harsh and fast discipline as opposed to approaching issues of behavioral misconduct with restorative justice practices, basically. And then you have the African American boys are over 3 times more likely to receive out of school suspension than white Americans. However, African American girls are 6 times more likely to receive out of school suspension than white Americans. And if you look at like research, it shows that Blacks and Latinos are always affected by this pipeline due to, you know, people in the at school making false judgments and not treating the child like they're supposed to. So basically, the school to prison pipeline began in the late 1990s when school safety all across America was a problem. They placed zero tolerance policy for children and officials to follow. It was basically after the Columbine school shootings. That's when like zero tolerance policies has always been in place, but it wasn't really like a, into effect until the 1990s after the shooting happened. So basically, the zero tolerance policies were widely adopted as a result of the Gun Free Act of 1994 to decrease gun violence on school campuses. However, like I said before, zero tolerance policies were developed from state and federal drug enforcement policies in the 1980s. So, of course, as you see, the zero tolerance policy was in the community before it got drugged into being in schools. It's always been there, but it wasn't enforced until the 1990s. But however, when the zero tolerance policy was placed into schools, the street, well, not the streets, but the communities didn't no longer need them, so they started canceling out the zero tolerance policies in the community and enforcing them in schools because of school shootings. So the Gun Act required that each school receive federal funding, must have policies or rules expelling any student caught with a firearm on campus for 1 year, and they also must report the student to the local law enforcement. As stated before, there were several high-profile school shootings in the 1990s that created a panic, causing the nation to create harsh weapon policies in schools. After the Columbine shootings, a poll found that two-thirds of Americans believed that a similar incident was very likely or somewhat likely to happen in their community. This is why they enforced the zero tolerance policy. Then you have the zero tolerance policy can also ultimately push out students through suspensions, expulsions, or the student may drop out. And this is because the zero tolerance policy was so harsh, it started creating, well, minor infractions started being the course of, or minor infractions caused suspensions and expulsions and stuff like that. So even carrying like sharp scissors or water balloons or something, minor infractions as those children were getting suspended for. And that can also push a student to want to drop out of school. So here is, in this slide, you see what the zero tolerance policy is, and some of the rules. So it requires school officials to hand down specific, consistent, and harsh punishment, either suspension or expulsion, when students break certain rules. The punishment applies regardless of circumstances, the reasons of the behavior, or the student's behavior of discipline problems. Some of the rules: bringing any weapon to school, including incident, innocent items like nail clippers and toy swords. Having alcohol or drugs, even over-the-counter medication, was not allowed. Is not allowed. Tobacco is not allowed. Fighting, not allowed. Threatening students or teachers, or saying anything that could be perceived as a threat, or any behavior that's considered disruptive, like cutting class or cutting in the lunch line, and so forth and so forth. So as a result, most schools put police officers on campus, and they were known as the school resource officers. So they were to be stationed on school campuses, and their job was to basically investigate criminal incidents and make referrals of students to the juvenile authorities when necessary. And in my research, a Matthew Theriot, who wrote School Resource Officers and the Criminalization of Student Behavior, because he was a professor studying this type of material. He said students in schools with SORs, which is abbreviated for School Resource Officers, were nearly 5 times more likely to be arrested for disorderly conduct rather than criminal behavior, which meant that school resource officers have increased the criminalization of students, and more children were being introduced to the legal system over minor offenses. So some of the effects of the pipeline. So once being excluded from school or labeled bad or criminal, students often find themselves stigmatized by their teachers, parents, friends, or parents of friends, and other community members. They experience confusion, stress, depression, and anger, as a result from being excluded from school and being treated harshly and unfairly by those in charge. Many students who express behavioral issues at school are acting out in response to a stressful or dangerous conditions in their homes or neighborhoods. So removing them from school can cause removing them from school and putting them back into that problematic environment will cause the students' actions to be greatly, greatly expand. Like they'll basically it's basically doing more harm than good for that student.